Happening now at 5, President Biden's major announcement today comes as he was facing mounting pressure from within his own party to step aside. Let's try to unpack all this a little more now with Mitch Kokai. Mitch, good to see you. Let's jump right in. A party's presumptive presidential nominee has never stepped out of the race so close to the election. This is uncharted territory.
It really is. Probably the closest thing that we could see to this is back in the Democratic Party in 1968 when President Lyndon Johnson, who had won an overwhelming victory in 1964, decided to drop out sort of late in the game. And like in 1968, the Democratic Convention is in Chicago, and people who are old enough to remember it or who have read the history books know that that was a wild time. There was a lot of discussion about the party sort of trying to anoint Hubert Humphrey as the nominee without going through a more of a democratic process. And my guess is the older Democrats in our audience are thinking about this right now and saying, oh no, we remember what happened then and how the country ended up with Richard Nixon because of it, and are hoping that there's a different situation this time. I heard just a few minutes ago you talking about Kamala Harris, the vice president, and her choice of a running mate, which is going to be an important decision if she is the nominee, but it's still not clear that she will be the nominee. We've seen a lot of Democrats come out right now in the hours after President Biden's announcement and say they are endorsing Kamala Harris, but not all of the prominent Democrats have done so. And when we've heard some say that they would like to see some sort of open process at the convention, which would mean that the vice president would have to fight for votes along with any other candidates. So it remains to be seen exactly who's going to be the nominee, which is tough in one respect for Democrats. It's also tough in some respects for Republicans, because we've seen Republicans already come out and attach Kamala Harris to President Biden and say that's the Biden-Harris team, and what you don't like about Biden, you also don't like about Harris. But if she's not actually the nominee yet, they could be throwing some ammunition where they don't need to if it ends up being some other person at the top of the ticket.
So give me your best guess, Mitch. Will Democrats coalesce behind Kamala Harris as their presidential nominee, or do you see others stepping forward to fight for it?
My guess right now would be that Kamala Harris would be the nominee, because that is the one that makes most sense based on where things stand now. She has been elected as vice president. She's already been one heartbeat away from the presidency. We've already seen a number of prominent Democrats come out and endorse her. But that doesn't mean that is exactly what's going to happen. And you have to be very careful at this point in reading what people are saying, because it's often said that everyone is in an election until the very moment that they're out, as we saw with President Biden, who's saying as recently as within the past few days, I'm going to keep fighting until he announced today that he's not. And then you aren't in the election until you're in. So the people who've been on the sidelines watching what's happening, none of them have come out and say, hey, I'd love to be the president, or I'd like to be the vice president, because they wanted to respect the Biden-Harris ticket. But now that Biden is out, you'll be seeing a lot more discussions behind the scenes within the Democrats about, is Kamala Harris the best candidate for us? One of the main reasons that Joe Biden is out is not necessarily because of the cognitive decline and the concern about his health and his ability to serve in the job, but it's been mainly the fact that they've looked at the polls, they looked at the fundraising and said he can't win. And so what they want is someone who can win. If they think they will win with Vice President Kamala Harris, or that they have the best shot of winning with Kamala Harris, she will be the nominee. But if people who are within the Democratic Party hierarchy look at the polling, look at the fundraising, and say, we can't win with Kamala Harris either, then you'll start hearing other names, and you'll have to hear them relatively soon, because Democrats have to get this resolved by the time they get to their convention, I would think.
So let's assume that Harris is the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. Who is she going to run with? Governor Cooper's name being mentioned a lot over the last few hours. Who's the choice for VP?
Has won 6 statewide elections in North Carolina, including 2 for governor, in a state that has otherwise been trending a bit toward the red state in terms of other statewide elections, but he has been successful. And so Democrats will look at that and say, look, this is a good candidate in the South. This is a person who puts North Carolina's 16 electoral votes squarely into play. But if it's not Roy Cooper, I think you see another governor is probably you've mentioned already on the telecast, the governor of Pennsylvania. We've talked about the governor of Kentucky, perhaps Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, which would make an all-female candidate, which would be something interesting that we haven't seen before and might be something that Democrats would be interested in doing. I don't think, even though he's probably the most prominent person to potentially come on the ticket, that it would be Gavin Newsom, just because so many people who are turned off about the progressive left within the Democratic Party wouldn't want to see the governor of California. But there are certainly a number of governors out there, including the ones that I mentioned, who could potentially be good candidates to be running mates for Kamala Harris.
Lots of decisions to make in the next days and weeks and 100 days till the election. Mitch Kokai helping break it all down for us. Mitch is senior political analyst over at the John Locke Foundation in Raleigh. Mitch, thanks.
Thank you, Joe.